Hello, Irish fans, and welcome to Dome and Domer, the oldest Notre Dame football podcast, coming to you since 2006. And not a lot
Wow.
has changed. We're getting better, but we're not quite there to where we can win a national championship and retire this podcast for
Is
all.
that the goal here? I've
That
I've
is
been
the
a little
goal.
unclear in the concept.
My oldest boys have told me that when I'm 90, I can turn it over to them and they'll take over and we'll eventually win a national championship. So, Ed, I'll start. Well, first off, obviously, I ran into you at the game, so I was clearly there at the game. Coffee, I thought I saw a Facebook post. Were you there at the game as well?
I was. I
Oh,
My sister invited me to go at the last minute.
bummer. I wish you would have said
Um,
something because I would have stopped by and said, Where did you tailgate?"
well, see, that's the thing. This game taught me why I usually host tailgates and not go to them because when you're wandering around the lot, it's a lot harder to meet up with people.
Yeah, I was literally wandering through the lots, couldn't find anybody. Went to my guaranteed stomping grounds that Ed was at, so I got a chance to at least catch up with a bunch of guys. But I'll start with you, Coffee, mostly because Ed's still finishing his dinner.
I'm done. I'm done.
Didn't share any with us.
Yeah, there you go. So, how do I say this? All right, looming in the background is the reality of the matter that the Northern Illinois loss becomes bigger and bigger and bigger each game that goes by. Mostly
Or smaller,
because what's
or
that?
smaller, or smaller.
Well, maybe, but I think the point is that as we see the ups and downs of this Notre Dame football team, they're clearly a very talented football team. They've got a lot of talent on this team, a lot of playmakers, a lot of depth, and it's a head scratcher to understand how did we get in the situation where we lost. Um, However, having said all that, we're moving ahead here. We've got to run the table, and this is kind of one of those games you circled on the calendar that was like, oh crap, you don't want to be not firing on all cylinders or have that one game where the offense doesn't click. That seems to happen every single season. There's always one game where we're just kind of off. The offense doesn't click, and you got to survive defensively to win the football game. But Coffee, what are your thoughts on where we're at this point in the season, knowing what we're up against, and the reality of the matter that it's an absolute must win at Georgia Tech?
No, I think you can tell by the way the votes go the last couple weeks. The pollsters are just itching to punish Notre Dame for that NIU game. I think that as long as they keep winning, they will drift upwards. But I think a combination of the lack of quality of that loss and the honestly the lack of quality of the schedule overall, although the back half is improving more than I think than we thought a couple weeks ago it would be like. I think that if Notre Dame wants to make the playoffs, then they're going to have to win out. A 10-2 Notre Dame with a loss to Northern in this schedule
No,
is just
they're
is
not.
not going to
They're
get
not
there.
getting in.
And
Yeah,
so one could say they're in the playoffs already because as long as they keep winning and they will continue to advance, uh, so to speak. The thing is, you look at the rest of the schedule. I could see any of those teams beating Notre Dame, and I could see Notre Dame beating any of those teams. So
yeah,
it doesn't help when you have players dropping like flies and
yeah,
you're losing guys left and right, but that's just how it is.
yeah. And I'm kind of curious because being there, it's interesting because you see things that you don't see on TV. Now, having said that, I what I didn't see, which I thought was kind of interesting, was I didn't see a lot of guys that Riley Leonard missed that were wide open. You know what I mean? Like I didn't see that at all. What I did see is maybe a little bit of a propensity for him to leave the pocket a bit earlier. But to be honest with you, I kind of think that's what you want him to do, being the elite runner that he is. And I think he made a couple big plays there that you saw where he had guys right on his tail and he kind of outran them. I mean, he went for 12 yards on a scramble that got us the first down in a key moment. And kind of moved the change and, kept the pressure on. And lo and behold, we executed like we needed to. But the only knock I would say that I did see is that for whatever reason on the long balls, he's not throwing to the space. He's kind of like winging it to the guy without really throwing it to the space on the deep balls. That's just what I saw. I mean, I don't know if you saw something differently in terms of your overall interpretation of the offense and where it's at and what the things are that they need to improve upon.
Yeah, I mean, I am surprised that it's taken this long for Riley Leonard to look like he's worthy of a $1 million NIL deal. But I do think that he is showing why he gives Notre Dame the best chance to win, and that the sort of the outcry for Steve Angeli over the last month or so is misplaced.
Died down at least.
Pardon me?
It's died down at least.
Yeah, but I think it was misplaced from the get-go. He's got a unique talent in terms of his ability to run and scramble and make people miss. He's actually proven to be pretty durable. He's been knocked around quite a bit, and he's hung in there. And he seems to be sort of finally feeling a little bit more comfortable in this offense, where he's not sort of aiming the ball; he's just throwing it. The slants that he threw for touchdown passes were really nice throws.
Yeah.
He put it in the spot where it needed to go. So I'd like to think that the back half of the season will be sort of what we were hoping for on a consistent basis. He's got the ability to win a football game. Notre Dame hasn't had a quarterback like that. I mean, Ian Book was pretty close, but he wasn't kind of that, that sort of that gunslinger type. I mean, Riley Leonard can win you a football game with his legs and with his power, and we'll see maybe with his arm. I'm also sort of, I guess I don't know what to make of quarterbacks getting on the same page with their receivers. And I don't know if that's coaching or if that's just a lack of time in the spring or, just a lack of game sort of interaction. But it was obvious the first 3, 4, 5 weeks that there was just not a good rapport with his receiving crew. And that seems to be, improving. I mean, he spread the ball around a lot on Saturday.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So I've been sort of bullish on him from the get-go. Where the whole sentiment around Riley Leonard is so different if Notre Dame, beats Illinois 17-16. We say that every week. It's just such an awful loss that is so puzzling to all of us. I still can't, I still don't understand. I still can't believe in this day and age, that Marcus Freeman is on the record saying, we took them for granted. everybody in the building thought we were going to, I mean, in what universe does a coach behave that way or act that way? I'll never understand that.
Yeah. Especially
I know that it's true. I know that it can be true and that could happen, but I just can't, I can't fathom approaching any football game that way.
So you got to guarantee win, especially in today's world where everybody's at with transfers and all that stuff.
I didn't hear Kalen DeBoer come out and say, well, we lost to Vanderbilt because we really didn't take them seriously all week.
Exactly. Right.
I mean,
right. Well, so Coffee, just to kind of shift gears here a little bit, I think that in terms of just, the positive things that are going on at the moment that gives us hope to believe that Notre Dame could pull this off are a couple of things that have emerged that were pretty evident on Saturday. And that's a few of the following things. One, Notre Dame does have elite running backs, and they've got 2 of them. And it's pretty obvious that either one of those guys can light it up on any given day. Interestingly, for whatever reason, they started Jadarian Price, and he responded. All of a sudden in the second half, Jeremiah Love takes off, and it's just like he's in another gear where those guys were stood no chance to catching him. So I think that if you just do an overall evaluation, you would say to yourself, okay, offensively, you've got two seriously elite running backs. You probably arguably have a third one in Riley Leonard at quarterback.
Sure.
And so and that's what gives us the luxury of maybe not having that elite attacking uh, quarterback throws that you see, like we saw in the game in Ohio State and Oregon, assuming you guys watched that. We don't have that kind of a guy at quarterback that can just wing it and make big, huge plays throwing the football consistently.
Well, not
But
consistently, but I think like I thought that pass to the 50 whatever yard pass to Bo Collins was another one of those where he just dropped that right on a dime, which was beautiful. Now, granted, it's you talked about consistency. I don't think he's necessarily been consistent, but now this is what is it, 2 out of 3 games where we've seen a pass like that. We know he's capable of it. I kind of wonder how the beginning of the season would have been if Riley Leonard had had the spring to
yeah, had the whole
work
spring.
with
I
everybody
agree. I think
and
it's pretty obvious.
get
Yeah.
acclimated to the offense. And uh, sour grapes and all that. But I think this team really needed that week off. I thought Howard Cross and Riley Mills played a lot better.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
exactly. They were great.
Totally.
and you could
Yeah.
say, well, Stanford isn't that good. Well, then again, the
No,
players,
their
the
offensive
teams that were
line's
playing
traditionally
beforehand
been
weren't all
good.
that great either. And I
Yeah.
think they really showed like a lot of what we saw last year. And I don't know whether they just needed a week off to rest up and get their minds right and say, okay, now we're going to jump in. And that's why I'm confident about Georgia Tech because I think they're a decent team. I think I think they have some offensive skill. I'm a little more worried about it with Morrison out, but I mean, not a lot of depth in the defensive secondary, although there still is talent, no doubt about it. But this is the same Georgia Tech team that got beat soundly by Louisville and needed a last second 68-yard thing to beat a terrible North Carolina
Yeah,
team.
but
So,
even in the Louisville game, they were up. I mean, that got away from them towards the end. But Ed, going to Coffey's point about Morris, I mean, obviously the big news, Morrison being out for the rest of the year. How weird is it that Jaden McKinney would be starting right now if he would have just stayed? You know, here it is, 2 games, and he'd be the starting guy with an opportunity to shine the rest of the season. You know what I mean? It's just weird. That's the world we now live in. And I feel bad for the kid, because I think he's an elite player. And, lo and behold, he's going to miss out on this opportunity, which allows these now freshmen more and the others to kind of step up and be a part of this. But boy, it really, if anything goes to show where the depth is at, this is how you expose it as the kind of injuries that Notre Dame's gone through up to this point so far this year.
Yeah, no, I think you'd have to say that, defensive recruiting has been and player development has been pretty damn good. I mean,
no
I
doubt.
think, Burnham was,
Great to have him back.
pardon
Yeah.
me?
It was great to have him back.
Yeah, yeah, no, he obviously is more than just a placeholder.
Yep.
Bryce Young is probably deserving of a starting assignment. Rubio being back, he played some snaps. I didn't see Onye out there, 47. I'm not quite sure
He
why
was
he didn't
out.
play. Yeah, but I agree with Mike Coffey. I mean, Mills and Cross, they seem to play with a renewed vigor, and maybe it was the week off that helped. But they're going to be sort of essential down the stretch because the best way to take pressure off some young, inexperienced defensive backs is to create pressure.
Yeah.
And so, they were harassing a very mobile quarterback, for most of the afternoon Saturday, which was good to see. One last thing about Riley Leonard, and this isn't any kind of an original point, but it was really sort of interesting to see how effective he can be on those RPOs.
Yeah.
He is adept at that, or at least looked adept at that Saturday, and had not really that had really not been a part of the package for him, or at least it was sort of the execution was much better Saturday. When you think about it, the offense has sort of fared better on the injury train somewhat than the defense, or at least the injuries have been on the offensive line where we have some plug and plays but my goodness, I mean, if Mitchell Evans could ever get healthy, that's a lot of weaponry.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really necessary to win a playoff game if in fact we get to one, because I think you can't replace Benjamin Morrison. You can't
No.
replace your starting defensive ends, even though we've got some very good players to sort of step in. But I would not be surprised if whether it's USC or maybe it's even Virginia, but before the end of the year, before the end of the season, Notre Dame has kind of like a shootout type game, and we're going to be surprised that the offense wins it as opposed to the defense.
Yeah. Well, to your point about the RPO, I mean, I think the touchdown pass to Reardon was a perfect example of that. I mean, it was so
Right.
obvious that that Riley saw that a mile away, pulled it, and then wide open in the flats. I mean, nobody around him. That kind of execution. Look, I think if he can continue to execute on the slants like he did on Saturday, the game in between 20 yards, he can be incredibly effective and only need to throw it deep 2 or 3 times a game. I mean, in all honesty, just to keep him honest, that pressure of the RPO and his ability to tuck it and run, like you say, I do think could what separate us. And Coffee, I would say that, for what, I don't know why, but I get the feeling that we're going to kind of eke it out Saturday. I think we're going to win. I don't see us losing for some reason. I kind of feel like there's enough momentum there to where it's a big time road game. We can take that. We've done well on the road in situations like this. I think the more distracting thing is an Army game where it's, the Shamrock Series or something like that, where, there's all these distractions going on, and then we've got a tough
Still don't
battle
know
with a
why they
team.
scheduled that. I mean, what
Yeah,
is
I
the
mean,
sense of doing a home game, flying all the way to New York, and then the next week flying to the complete other coast to play Southern Cal? I mean, it's so goofy. But I think the one advantage Notre Dame has in this area, and this is something that Mike Frank was talking to me about, and said, I think other team with these new teams getting into the Big Ten, they are now finally getting a taste of the kind of travel that Notre Dame has to do every year.
Yeah, it's true.
Where we're
Yeah,
taking trips out to LA, we're taking trips to the East Coast, down to the South. We're going. I mean, yeah, maybe we're playing 7, 8 home, but we're traveling around where you get some teams in the Big Ten didn't even leave their home state like for their first 8 games or something, and now they're having to go all the way over to the left coast and finding out that can be draining. I mean, having to go all the way out there and get the job done. I mean, Southern Cal is going all over the place now.
yeah,
And I think they're coming to the realization that, hey, Notre Dame's had it tough these last X number of years flying around, but subjecting ourselves to it on purpose, that's just dumb.
yeah.
I don't know why this schedule
Well,
is dumb.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would, I guess my gut instinct is that, at least in my mind, I kind of feel like the chances of us winning out are like 70%. I think it's definitely greater than 50-50. I think it's more closer to 70. But I think as each game goes, man, the pressure just seems to mount more and more and more. You get the win against Georgia Tech, and then it just starts to rise. Each week is gonna increase, increase, increase.
I mean, if
And
I'm not mistaken, Notre Dame's probably going to end up with 9 of the 12 teams on their schedule being bowl eligible. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but and that's not terrible. I
No,
mean,
that's not at all.
I think the reason that Notre Dame's schedule is sort of seen, by many, including many fans and us, is because there really just isn't a marquee matchup. There's no Georgia, there's no Ohio State, there's no Alabama. And that tends to sort of overweight a schedule in its strength. But from top to bottom, there's really only three losers on this schedule, and that's Purdue, Miami, Ohio, and probably Stanford from Saturday. But every other team is currently over 500,
Yeah.
and will almost surely end the year over 500, if not. And we'll probably go to a bowl. I don't think there's probably not another playoff team on the schedule,
No.
unless A&M really sort of takes off. But it's not, it's I think sometimes, just like in polling, sort of the preseason determines too much, right? Preseason polls are,
Yeah.
that's the starting point. And of course, that's a ridiculous starting point because nobody knows, how good anybody is at that point. Same thing with schedules, going in, it's like, oh, what a weak schedule, what a weak schedule. Well, who would have thought that, at this point in the season, both Army and Navy would be ranked and Florida State would be 1-5. So,
Yeah.
um, you know,
Well, yeah, and the weird thing is, I mean, Florida State, USC, both top 10 teams preseason.
sure.
So the schedule didn't look nearly as bad as it did after week three. So you can't argue the scheduling in terms of that. Plus, I mean, for whatever reason, I kind of feel like, for God's sakes, I mean, we finally had somewhat of a reasonable schedule going into the season. I mean, when's the last time that's happened? In the last 6 years. So, that is what it is. But Coffee, I'm just, ultimately at the end of the day, when you look at the teams in front of us, Miami, Clemson, um, their schedules are not real difficult moving forward. So, I mean, I think that if you were to just kind of play this game of, okay, who are the 12 teams that make the playoffs? Unfortunately for Notre Dame, there's probably 10 that are guaranteed to make it, assuming that things, kind of check out in reality of what we think. And there's really only like two spots that we're fighting for here. That makes it really tough.
True. I don't know. I kind of wonder if the perception of the SEC is going to come back to the pack. And I can't remember if we talked about this before or not, but with Saban gone, and we've seen Alabama wander in the wilderness for X number of years before they picked him up. And so if one of their premier programs comes back to the pack, does the perception of the SEC kind of dwindle maybe a little bit? Because you get these teams that they spend the entire season just playing each other and then three FCS teams or whatever from their neighborhood. I mean, I realize they don't do that, but you don't see a lot of the cross pollination that we usually see. And the fact that the Big 12 and the ACC are going to have guaranteed entrance into the playoffs when I'm not sure those champions are going to be all that good. And
No, and I think that's the problem is it makes it that much more difficult for us when you guarantee those spots and they're probably not deserving of it. And so then you've got to, look, if you look at it, there's probably for sure three SEC teams that make it. There's probably for sure three Big Ten teams that make it. There's six right there. Then you got maybe two in the ACC. I mean,
I don't
it,
think it'd be two.
I
No,
don't
no,
know.
no. Clemson already got smoked by Georgia.
Yeah, but
And
they got one loss and they got nobody left on their schedule.
well,
So
they're going to have to
Well,
play
they're going
Miami
to
in
have
the
to
ACC.
play Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll have to play Miami in the ACC championship game. I mean,
okay, but if
one.
Miami goes undefeated, then what?
The ACC champ's going to make it anyway. If
Right.
Clemson ends up getting smoked by Miami, they were smoked by
Well,
Georgia.
okay, but they're out. But what if Clemson beats Miami? That's the only loss for Miami. That's going to be
Well,
hard to keep them
I don't.
in.
I don't think that's. Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
Th-
I'm just, but the point I'm trying to make is that it gets weird for us. You know what I mean? Because it's like we're fighting for spot 10 or 11 or 12,
Well,
And
which honestly is why I think our independent days are numbered. I mean, I think we're going to be looking at 5 years from now, I would bet a large amount of money Notre Dame's going to be in the Big Ten because Southern Cal's in there now.
well, we might be
As
forced.
much
There
as we
might
said,
not
oh,
be
we
any
we have a
independents.
path to the
Yeah,
playoff. I mean, it's a not zero chance that an 11-1 Notre Dame team might get left out, and they will use NIU as the excuse.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I think that's pretty unlikely, but it will be interesting how many two-loss teams
Yeah.
are ahead of us. If we win out, I think that's going to be very telling in terms of, and this is where, again, I'm going to say it again, but this is where I just get so annoyed that there's a selection committee.
Yeah.
There should be a rubric, there should be an algorithm that chooses these teams, and not human beings. I just don't
Just
trust
because
them.
everybody knows what you're up with, you know what the score is. You know, like, all right, here's what we need to do.
Well, I
Um,
just don't. I have a kind of a fundamental problem with these sort of subjective evaluations that take into account things like injuries and potential and whatever. I mean, I think that the the 12 teams should be in based on merit, not some subjective evaluation by committee members on who has the has the potential to, do better than another team that has a worse record or a better record. I mean, I mean, you should get in based on your performance over 12 games. And if your starting quarterback goes down, or if you've got six injuries like Notre Dame or whatever, just shouldn't matter. I just don't
yeah.
think it's fair
Well,
to the players who get there.
well, here's what's definitely not happening, Ed, in case this is news for you. The committee's not breaking down film game and trying to figure out who's got the better offensive prowess when it comes to being able to dominate the run or anything
Yeah,
like
but
that.
under the rules, that's exactly what they should be doing.
Exactly, and they're not. I mean, don't
No.
kid yourself. It's all a political games. But that it is what it is, and that's where we're at, unfortunately. Everybody thinks that now that we've expanded it to 12, we're going to get to the true national champion. But the problem is, well, how do you determine that 12? And lo and
Right.
behold, wait for the first time that a 12 seed wins the national championship. Oh my God. That's going to open up all kinds of cans of worms. All right, let's go to predictions. Coffee, what are your thoughts on Saturday? What do you think is going to shake out?
well, I'm thinking that Notre Dame's offense is probably among the better offenses that uh, Georgia Tech has faced all year, and the Georgia Tech defense is definitely not the best defense that Notre Dame has faced all year. So I'm going to say 35-20. Notre Dame wins.
There you go. Ed, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm gonna need to consult my experts here. That's
There
Tyson and that's Duncan.
you go.
They're much smarter than me. Um,
Uh,
but I'll say, I mean, I think, I think the thing that Coffee said earlier is the sort of biggest development coming out of the Stanford game, and that was Howard Cross and Riley Mills playing like All Americans, or at least looking like All Americans. They both had those kinds of accolades preseason. So if they continue to play at a really high level, I think that makes Notre Dame's defense really, really difficult to contend with. And look at how they performed on fourth down.
yeah.
Playing well on fourth down really starts up the middle. And those two guys plus Kaiser makes you a very, very tough team up the middle. So I will say that and I think the offense will continue to sort of hum a little bit. So I'll say Notre Dame's going to win 41-14.
There you go. I am leaning towards you guys. I think it is going to be a significant win. I think it's going to be up, mostly because I think it's going to be the thing that Freeman's able to get these guys up for the fact that they're going on the road. This is the first big, huge challenge with the weight on their shoulders of winning out. And I think he's going to get them riled up for this. So I do think it's going to be a significant win. I think it'll be tight at the end of the first quarter. I don't know why, but we seem to struggle getting off the blocks in games. We've just, for whatever reason, we don't, we're not taking charge right from the get-go. But
except in the game that we lost.
right, right,
True.
exactly. But in any event, I kind of see a similar thing. I'm going to go with 38-14. And I do think it'll be tight at the end of the first quarter, but then I think we just overwhelm them. And, our offensive prowess is going to come. I think Riley Leonard's going to have another good game. I think he's going to continue to improve. And I just think now that we've figured out this combination of him with the RPO, with our elite running backs, I don't see us struggling offensively. I think the struggles offensively are going to come later with Navy and Army, unfortunately.
I do think that it's also the first game in a while that we'll have played to a broader audience, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be an
Yep.
ESPN 3:30 game.
Yep.
There'll be whatever more committee members, more casual
Yeah,
fans
a lot
watching.
of lights. Yep.
There's kind of a little bit of I saw something today where there was a little bit of actually a little bit of media love for both Notre Dame and Clemson, talking about how they have overcome sort of early season poor performances to sort of really get back on stride and rack up some impressive wins. So that has to keep going because in this system, style points matter. And
Yeah.
any way you slice it, 41-10 is definitely better than 30-22 or
Yep.
whatever. So
True.
Yeah.
Very
they've
true.
got to continue to. Notre Dame would have scored 56 if Micah Gilbert could catch. So
Right.
there you
Yeah.
go.
No, no, no. Right. Exactly. All right. Perfect. We'll leave it there. You've been listening to Dome and Domer, an online conversation about Notre Dame sports from a fan's perspective. For Ed Jordanik and Mike Coffey, I'm Mike Brammer. Thanks for listening.